All right. So, Mandy, we are recording. We are live, and thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I'm a big fan of your show and your YouTube channel. Sorry, and I really appreciate your time. So, thank you.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear it. So, I know high school was a while ago for you, right?
You wanted to say a really, really long time ago. So go ahead. Go ahead.
Maybe not. I wouldn't add maybe three reallys, but maybe, it seemed like a long time ago. But
I graduated from high school in 19 June of 1994. Were you even born? I'm
I was
46.
yeah, I was just about to say I was like, I was 96, baby. So that's
Okay, well there you go.
yeah, that's awesome. So what was, if you can remember as much as you can about it, what was that transition like for you leaving to kind of where we are now? Like, take us through that.
Well, that's a lot of years, but
Perfect. All the time in the
I
world.
uh, I knew that I think for pretty much my whole life that I wanted to be a teacher.
Nice.
And so I transitioned pretty easily from high school to Laurentian in just a general arts program. I have a double major in French and English.
Oh, nice.
And then I just moved directly to teachers college. So it wasn't a time full of deliberation for me. It was something that I
Nice.
knew that I always wanted to do. And I did it. And I got a job teaching pretty much immediately. Taught for several years, had a family, all that kind of stuff,
Hmm.
and then transitioned into what I'm doing now. Actually, back up a little bit. My kids got to be a little bit older, and then you're kind of like, well, you've spent all of this time raising a family.
Yeah.
You're busy being a mom and doing this and that and whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then once your kids start to become a little bit more self-sufficient, you're like, well, now what? So
Yeah.
I was big into fitness. I decided to become a personal trainer
Oh,
and take
cool.
my business online. And that went okay. It was fun. But then I told myself, I only want to do this for as long as it's fun.
Hmm.
And then it started to become more of a chore for me.
Yeah.
So I gave that up. And now I just kind of do what I do for fun. And that's
Nice.
that.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. What was so yes then how long ago did you get out of teaching?
I still teach, but
Yeah.
that's not really, what I talk about on social media and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. So that's sort of like just my real life that I keep kind of more private.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay. So then kind of what's COVID been like for you with
Mm,
everything you got going on and all these transitions and still teaching and still doing what you do?
yeah.
So,
Well, COVID, like for anyone, I guess, for me has not been enjoyable.
nope.
Luckily, I've been lucky enough to stay safe and healthy,
Yeah,
and so has my family.
that's good.
So, so that's good.
Yeah.
But I'm actually an introvert, and I don't have like a raging social life outside of my home anyway.
Yeah.
So, to me, being I don't want to say stuck at home, but forced to spend more time indoors,
Yeah.
I don't mind it. I'll be honest. I'll be honest. I
Oh,
The
nice.
biggest thing for me is that I feel bad for small businesses who are
Mm,
struggling to
yeah.
survive. So for me, the empathy part is the biggest thing.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad everybody's like, I'm glad that it's not something that you found is a very big toll that it's taking on you. Because I know there's quite a few people, myself included, where if I wasn't, I'm fortunate enough to be working. I work in property management, so I don't,
Mm-hmm.
and getting people into buildings is considered an essential, so like essential service. I guess people need a
Right.
place to live, right? So, for that reason, thankfully, but every person I talk to, it's good. You're probably one of the first people in a while that's like, I don't mind it. I'm like, that's really good to hear. I'm sure that's really good for your mental health for sure. So
Yeah, yeah. So I don't struggle with it in that way personally. Like I
nice.
said, it's more I recognize that the struggle is huge for most people, and so my heart goes out to those people who are struggling to survive at this point financially.
Mm-hmm.
It's just such a huge obstacle. And then to attempt to overcome that, it's not just like they get to go back to work and things are as they were. Like lots of people have lost out on months and months, almost a year now of income, right? And that's devastating. So yeah, it's too bad.
How does how does the teaching online work for you? Like because you're not teaching, are you teaching post-secondary, or if
Let's
you
get
mind
into that a
answering?
little bit later.
Okay, sounds good. So how I kind of discovered you was I ended up talking to my friends Andre and Cliff, and then I've been following them for a while, and then seeing you guys or them do your show, and that I was like, oh, cool. Like when it comes to podcasts in Sudbury, I get really excited because I'm like, there's part of me that's like, oh, competition, and then there's part of me that's like, oh, this is super cool to see what somebody else is doing, and then from a local point of view and seeing how that all works. But with that, how did you get into podcasting? Like, tell me about that.
Well, like I said, I started out on social media because I was doing online training.
Mm-hmm.
So almost 3 years ago, I guess it'll be 3 years ago in March, I started my first ever social media profile. So before March of 3 years ago, I had nothing. I didn't have Facebook. I didn't have Instagram. I didn't even really know what Instagram was. But I thought, I'm not planning to train at a gym. So let me take it online and see what happens. So I started with a Facebook account. And then eventually I moved to Instagram and got that going.
Yeah.
And like I said, I did training online for a while and it was fun. And then it became a chore to try to attract clients. And it just wasn't something I was interested in spending my time doing. So I started focusing my profile more on me. And it just kind of developed. My Instagram account just grew fairly quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
I started to pick up some, I guess you would call them influencer opportunities.
Oh, cool.
I don't love that word, but that kind of thing. So
Yeah, it's a little odd. I don't know if there's like a stigma behind it or what there is, but
yeah, and it's not something that I sought out. I didn't set out to do this. It just kind of happened.
Yeah.
And then I started sort of getting bored with Instagram. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll do a podcast.
Nice.
And so I just very quickly started an audio only podcast. But then when I went to, I did a poll of my followers and everyone thought that video would be much better. So
Nice.
I said, okay, I'll bring my podcast to YouTube. And so that's my new focus. And, it's such a different beast. So I'm spending a lot of time figuring that out now.
Yeah.
I think, was that your question? Did I ramble?
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. I
Okay.
love listening to what, that's why I love having a show is I like to listen to what I want to learn from you as much as possible about anything and everything. That's where it's like, all right, here's my topics. Here's my things. I want to know everything I can to make even, and as much as I do it for other people as well, it's a matter of, I do it for myself as well. Like it's not just anything you say is going out my one ear and out the other, and I'm expecting somebody else to take that information and do something with it. It's oh, interesting. Oh, that's how you can build that. Cool. So that's been cool.
A lot of different perspectives.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure you've noticed that too. Like just starting your own. And then I found when I was listening to one of your episodes a while ago, I think it was the Cliff and Andre one, or it was when you were just talking with Cliff, but how cool is it? And I want to know, is this how you reach out? Like, how do you reach out to your guests?
I randomly message them.
Yeah.
And
yeah. Awesome.
And so that's what I was laughing with, because I'm an introvert. So actually producing and recording my podcasts is very anxiety inducing.
Really?
So, yeah. So he's like, I survive, but I mean, it's not something that I go into with this excitement because I'm not naturally a good small talker, like conversation doesn't come naturally to me. So I was telling Cliff, yeah, so I randomly message people
Yeah.
to ask them if they want to be a guest on my YouTube channel. And then they say yes. And I'm like, oh, oh, for real? So
You're
then,
serious?
half expecting that people will say no, but then
Yeah.
they say yes. So I'm forced to follow up on it. So it brings me out of my
I'm
comfort zone,
forced
which,
to follow up on it. Oh,
I think it's a
that's
good
so
thing
funny.
that you do things that are not natural to you and you sort of challenge yourself a
Mhm.
bit because one thing that I hate almost more than anything is complacency.
Yeah,
And so, I feel like always trying something new, you know, what harm can it do? So here I am.
that's a good point. That's a really good point. I think there's not a lot of people, at least from what I've noticed, being around the demographic that I see every day, and people my age in their early to mid 20s and late 20s, they don't really want to do anything, let alone do anything new.
Mm.
It's
It's
weird. I
it's
don't know if you've
hard.
noticed
It's
that.
hard. Yeah, especially
Yeah.
now. Now is a different time. So it's almost like people don't want to be at home, but now that they've had to be at home for so long, it's difficult to break out and do anything because you're just so used to doing nothing. So I think it'll be a
Yeah.
pretty rough transition for a lot of people having to get back into the real swing of things,
Mhm.
whenever that happens.
Yeah, I thought it was only going to last 2 months, but now almost a year later, it's
That's right.
worse than it's been, and there's snow outside, so I mean, there's
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
excitement there. But you know what, I was talking to a friend of mine about a month ago, and it was about like the power of how social media has become. And I don't know if have you ever seen The Social Dilemma?
No, I don't think
Oh,
so.
oh, you'd eat it up. It's such a good movie. It's like a documentary on social media on Netflix, and they have the I guess like CEOs and founders of like Twitter and some like higher ups in Facebook and stuff talk about the behind the scenes of like how they
Uh,
manipulate people's minds to always want, like, being reliant on these devices. And then
mm,
fast forward to a month ago, sorry, talking to a friend of mine, how it's such a cool, powerful tool that can also be good. And I think you exemplify that when you're saying that I just fire him a message, kind of how, or exactly how I connected with you. It's like, oh,
mm,
I've heard of you from other people. I've listened to your show a couple times. Mandy, like, you have a show. Let's get you on mine. Let's chat. Let's chop it up and hear what you have to
mhm.
say. So
Yeah. There's
it's
nothing really to lose in that situation, right? So
right.
the worst case scenario is that the person says no.
That's a good point. That is kind of the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
I feel the left on scene. I'm like, oh, they don't even, that's never, I don't know if that's ever happened though. No. And I don't have nearly the like following or the presence that you do. And so to have like people, and I can see I can understand and relate when you say the anxiety kicks in a little bit when because more often than not, I don't know about you, but everybody I have on the show, I look up to or admire in some way or another, whether
Mhm.
it's for who they are, what they do, what they stand for, and what they've done with their life so far. And I'm like, whoa, this is cool. And it's like, oh, they're going to give me their time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
No, I
cool.
agree. It's always, people are so generous with their time. That's something that I find, the people that I've asked so far to join me on my show are busy humans. And so
Yeah.
I feel like for them to carve out part of their time for me, that's a really great gift. And I really appreciate that. And so I
Mhm.
know what you're saying totally. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. Now, what I've heard you say a couple times in the past, and then today even once, you mentioned, and you say you're socially awkward or you're shy, and then talking. It's weird to me because it's
Really?
really cool that you put yourself out there, and then you have these vulnerable conversations with people and friends of yours, and you're just sending them blank messages. I'm like, I feel like you're almost using your introvert as a skill. Like, how do you use that? Do you just face your fear? Or?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm also somebody who always follows through with things that I say that I'm going to do, or plans that I
Right.
make, or when I have a goal, I definitely achieve it.
Hmm.
So there's no way that I'm messaging you and saying, "Hey, you want to be on my podcast?" and then decide that I feel too shy to talk to you. You just do it.
Yeah.
You just jump in. Like I'm not painfully shy to the point of, you know, that it being a detriment to moving forward with anything, but
Hmm.
being outgoing or chatting is just not really that natural to me, although I am getting better at it.
Nice.
This is forcing it.
Yeah. Having to have the conversations.
Yeah.
So that's good. Do you feel it's do you prefer hosting though? Or do you prefer like just this where the pressure's off you, all you have to do is show up?
Yeah, there's something to that, to the just showing up. But then, having said that, knowing that you're more the reason why people are watching is kind
Ooh,
of a pressure in itself, right?
interesting.
So,
I never
as the
thought of that.
host, as the host, you have a series of questions that you know you're going to ask,
Right.
and while some of your guests are probably tuning in just to watch you, they're also tuning in to see the guest, and the
Yeah.
onus for most of the information or most of the talking
Right.
comes from the guest. But it's easier to respond as the guest because you just I feed off of your questions,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it has
Right.
pros and cons.
Interesting. I never would have
Yeah.
thought of that. And so, oh, I never would have thought of that pressure where it's, hey, you're now half the audience or bringing in half the audience to watch. And then it's they show up for you or they show up for your guests and stick around for you kind of thing. It feels like.
Or they're listening more to what the guest is saying because
Hmm.
presumably that's the interest point of the show, right? Is to listen to
Right.
what the guest has to say. So
Hmm.
fingers crossed no one watches. No, I'm just joking.
Fingers crossed if you're like, got no pressure. I don't need it. So, um, why over 40 as a brand for yourself? Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, that could not be what it is, but it's what it seems like what you're gearing your audience towards and stuff. And I think it's super cool. I'm just curious, like why that niche? How'd that kind of come
Well,
about?
first of all, that's me. I'm 46, so I know it because I live it and experience it,
Right.
and I just find
Excuse me.
there's not a huge demographic with a social media presence of that age. Like, I mean, it's growing
Interesting.
and you can definitely find it, but you're looking more at celebrities, right? Who
Yeah.
are over 40 and doing this and that. Um, and I'm obviously not a celebrity. And the reason why it kind of occurred to me in the first place as part of the reason why I got out of training is because people were contacting me all of the time with questions, but they weren't fitness related questions. It was,
Mm.
a lot of mostly women my age would, around my age would be contacting me, asking me stuff like, where'd you get your purse? Where do you get your nails done? All,
Yeah.
these sorts of questions. And so then it started to occur to me that this is what that demographic is looking for. There are
Yeah.
people like me who have spent a lot of time, you know, pursuing a career, raising a family. And now it's kind of like when you get to that certain age, like maybe later 30s, depending when you have kids or if you do,
Yeah.
you sort of re-emerge and you're like, whoa, it's not the 90s anymore, So now
Oh.
what do I do?
Yeah.
What do I do? Right?
Yeah. It's a different world
Um,
almost.
yeah. So just that was kind of the initiating moment, I guess, for me when I decided that maybe I'll just start not even really doing anything, but just showing pictures of myself. And not that, I call myself the over 40 expert, but I am by no means that. But it's just, just kind of a thing. And so
I mean, it
I just
works.
go with it.
So
Yeah, it's working.
yeah,
So
it's
yeah.
working so far. No
Yeah.
complaints. So that's good. That's interesting though, because
Yeah.
what I'm also wondering on that subject is what's it called? I talked to a mutual friend of ours, Andre, and he said something similar to that on this topic, whereas post like having kids, marriage, and you're like, okay, almost like you said, it's not the 90s anymore. Now what?
Mhm.
I'm like married, I have kids. I don't like, there's no, I've
Yeah.
done all that. So he's saying to me, he's like, man, 40 is the new 20. I
Mhm.
was like,
Mhm.
interesting. What do you, what's your perspective on that little nugget
Yeah,
there?
I definitely agree. I mean, I something that I always say is that I would definitely not trade 46 for 26 ever. Never.
No,
No.
really?
Uh,
That's cool.
you know, I have
Interesting.
I'm financially stable now.
Mm,
I have a partner that I love. I have kids that I love. I have
that's
my
awesome.
health. I'm
Mhm.
in the best shape of my life. I have life experience, which
Yeah.
is, probably the main thing.
Yeah, no
Um,
kidding.
and I don't, I don't want to have to go through all of that.
Mm.
It's taken me what 40 years to figure it out. I
Yeah,
don't want to figure it out again. I mean, I guess if I could take
right.
everything that I have and am now and be 26 and have all of this time to exist,
Hmm.
um, that would be worth it. But going backwards, never. No, never.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow. Even
Mm,
like, wow, that's cool. I never would have thought of
yeah.
that. I would have said, oh, I'd kill anything to be 20 again. And I'm like,
No,
no, I don't know
no,
if
thank you.
that's, yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if that's, I feel that can be a very, and it could just be the industry I work in. I meet a lot of like men in their like 40s and 50s, and they're always, or even 30s, and they're like, my back's always sore.
Mm,
Like, what I'd kill to be your age again. And I'm like,
yeah.
it's interesting you saying
Well,
the polar opposite.
it depends on how you take care of yourself as well, too, right? So
Yeah.
if you don't take care of your body, eat well most of the time, you know, stay in relatively good
Okay.
shape, then you're gonna feel awful.
Hmm.
Um, but some 20-year-olds feel pretty awful too. So
Yeah, that's a good point. I think you're right. It kind of depends
mhm,
on how you take care of yourself and everything.
definitely,
Do you find it's
definitely.
more important now, like down the road, to take care of yourself, or like almost play catch up, or is it better just start off and try to get in better health? Like,
I've never been someone who's really struggled with health and fitness issues.
nice. Yeah.
I would say that probably I'm in better shape now than I was in my
Yeah.
20s and 30s rather, just because oh, in the olden days of the 90s, when I was a teenager and going into university,
Hmm.
working out and fitness wasn't what it is now, right?
Right.
And we had no social media, we had no, so you kind of watched what you ate and you did some, cardio, and that was it.
Yeah.
So I was in okay shape or whatever. And then after I had my kids, I didn't want to keep on that
Yeah.
60 pounds that I gained both times. So I started taking working out more seriously.
Nice.
And now it's the 2000s. So there's a lot more information out there on what to do to stay
So much more
fit
out there.
and whatever. Right. So,
Mhm.
and then, like I said, as my kids started to get older, it became easier for me to take more time to focus on myself and fitness and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's important to, whenever you kind of get the epiphany or the realization that, well,
Mhm.
I need to take care of myself, you should do that. And it's best, I would think, to develop that habit early, like we try to teach our kids now as teenagers, like you're working out and you're eating properly to maintain health. But I think the thing that changes mostly, or that did for me, and I think for a lot of people, is that um, yeah, I work out and I eat well because I
Mhm.
want to look good,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
obviously.
it's what everybody,
Uh,
yeah, it's what it is.
I think people would be lying if they didn't say that was one motivator.
A hundred
Um,
percent. Yeah.
but now more for me, it's that I want to extend this good health into even older age.
Yeah. Right. That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's really
So
cool.
different motivation, I guess, or a
Yeah.
different factor of motivation. Yeah.
Now, something cool I'm wondering is, um, how do you instill, and it could be whether from personal experiences or what you've seen worked with friends of yours, but or even with yourself, how do you instill, or what do you recommend people do to instill in their kids growing up to have that habit of being in shape, healthy eating? Do you think it's like a lead by example thing, or how do they do it?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of both. I mean, I think you have to be really careful, especially with girls, because, you don't want to be pressuring them. There's already enough
Hmm.
pressure in society about the way you should look and,
Yeah.
how thin or not thin you should be, or,
Hmm.
that kind of thing. And so I think that my partner and I, try to lead more by example.
Nice.
And then, we'll talk to our kids about things like the importance of why we're eating this way, and or why we're not eating another way,
Yeah.
or why we're working out, and that kind of thing. So, we basically just let them kind of experience life and figure it out on their own and take initiative on their own. Like, we don't
Hmm.
force them to do any particular activities or eat a certain way, but
Right.
you know, and then I think they, like I said, they just kind of learn by example.
Right.
Yeah,
Interesting. I've always
yeah,
felt seeing, yeah, like seeing friends of mine, even as like younger dads, or more so my older brothers, and just the way they kind of deal, because that's my way of relating to the having kids things. Like, oh, my older brothers have kids, so now all of a sudden I think I know a thing or two about it, but
yeah.
it's not true. But I find seeing it and how it's everything, because it's weird. I never would have thought how much of an example of a role parents play. It's not just what they say or what they do. It's there's everything. There's like the mannerisms, the way they talk to other people, the way
Hmm.
they conduct themselves. I didn't know it was that many things they took
Yeah,
from the people they're around or they look up to. Never would have
yeah.
thought that. So it's
Well,
interesting.
I still even think of myself now as I am now, and I
Mhm.
I see my parents, right?
Really, yeah,
So, as when you're growing up and you're like, oh, my parents are so embarrassing and or so annoying,
yeah.
I'm sure my kids think that about me at times, but they'll end up being me. So,
Interesting. I'm always hoping the opposite. I'm like, I don't want to end up like them, and then you're saying, you're like, yeah, you're
and
you're
then
gonna
you
be.
will.
Damn it. No.
Yeah.
Oh no. Oh man. I don't know. Jesus. So your channel and your show, it seems to be geared towards, you have a lot more content, it seems, and correct me if I'm wrong for sure on this, but it seems geared towards men
It is.
more so.
Yes.
Okay. I'm not crazy to think that.
No.
Okay.
In
Whew.
fact,
Awesome.
Cliff, another mutual friend of ours,
Yes.
helped me pick the name, which is, I just changed it to For the Gents.
For the gents. I
What do
love
you
it.
think? Do
I
you love
love
it?
it.
Okay.
I love it. That's awesome.
And so the reason why I target men is, they're my audience. I know it's
Yeah.
shocking. It's hard to believe that. But yeah, no, so you can analyze your audience demographic if you know that,
Hmm.
through Instagram. And my audience demographic is about 68% men over 35. So I thought, why would you reinvent the wheel? Why, they always say when you watch any kind of pro who's giving advice on content creation, the one of the biggest tips for creating content is to create content that your audience wants to watch. So you don't create what they call selfish content, which is shit that you want to talk about,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You make stuff for the audience who's watching you, or else they're not going to watch. So I
Yeah.
thought, well, if nearly 70% of my audience is men over 35, why would I do a makeup tutorial? Right?
Huh.
Like, they might tune in for a
Yeah.
second because they want to see me or whatever it
Yeah.
is, or they're interested in what might
Yeah. But
happen.
then you don't get your audience retention, and then nobody. Yeah, it's
That's
this
right. That's right.
whole thing.
Yeah. So
Huh.
I thought, I'll target that demographic in possibly a way that's not generally targeted,
Mhm.
which is, um, presenting topics that, you know, men care about or like or enjoy watching, at least I think.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure it out a little bit, but from a woman's perspective.
Which I think is something that, excuse me, and this is something that I found I got really, I wouldn't say even, because I don't like saying this sentence, but better with women. I just say more confident myself. Let's say that instead. By asking women questions about like, well, what color looks best? Everything shy of that, where it's like I can't. It almost feels weird asking a guy friend of mine versus asking like a woman friend of mine, like, hey, what do you think of the shit? And they're like, oh, it looks good, or it really brings out your eyes. I'm like, my best friend, my best guy friend wouldn't have said that. So it's a weird. So I'm like, it's probably the most underrated perspective you like there is. It's like a woman's perspective on like the way guys dress and the way they be. It's very underrated, and I think it's something that a lot of dudes and especially guys my age even, and nowadays COVID time, and then with the era of social media and how they conduct themselves, I think it's huge to take full advantage of that. So if you're listening, watching, and you're a dude, check out Mandy's YouTube channel. So
yeah, definitely. No, it's just something. Also, I think you had a point that sometimes, and this is actually in my bio, sometimes an unbiased female perspective is exactly what you need.
Yeah.
So, you know, exactly like you're saying, how do I tie this tie? Like, does this tie match the shirt? What about my socks? Yeah. Should I wear a belt? What about a 3-piece suit? Do I need cufflinks? Anything, you know, like those are.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Got this. No. Is it working? Oh no.
Content that men generally tend to be more interested in, like sports or, you know, whatever, to, you know, other social media influencers, to outdoor stuff, you know, anything. Not that women aren't interested in those things, but I target my audience. So.
Yeah, which is smart. I never would have thought to like look and go, oh, this is my demographic. But I've noticed though with my audience so far, at least with the podcast specifically, not so much YouTube, but this is who, like you said, I think it's really smart to go, oh, this is my demographic. Well, 80% of my followers are men. Like you said, why do a makeup tutorial? People will watch it, but it's
maybe
more or less people, if at all. Right.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. So that's really cool though. That's really interesting. So how do you go about doing that then? Is it just a lot of research, or because you did a beard oil review and things like that? I'm like, you don't have a beard. So how is it? What's that process like?
Yet.
Unreal. Would it just be like a 5 o'clock shadow, sorry, or would it be like a Gandalf?
Well, I just started out 5 o'clock shadow, see where it went.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I get it.
How do I pick topics? To be honest, right now they're just kind of random. So what I've been doing is thinking of guests and then thinking who wants to watch this. And, you know, if the answer is definitely not men, then I don't ask them. But if it's like men, but only if we talk about this, then I pick the guest, and then we sort of transit or like steer or veer the topic towards a more male-oriented conversation. Like the other day when I spoke to somebody about wine, it was, you know, we talked about things like, well, if you're on a date, how do you know what wine to choose off the menu? Or, you know, just some things kind of like that, like some date night suggestions or whatever.
Right. Like if you're going out and there's, oh, you know what she wants to order, so you get a wine that pairs well with that, and type of thing.
Yeah. Because I think, you know, a lot of times we're worried about the cost, and you don't want to seem like cheap by ordering a less expensive wine, but at the same time, choosing the most expensive option isn't always the best idea either. So,
right,
you know,
it might taste worse.
Just some considerations like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. What is something like a common consistency you hear women say as a piece of advice for men? that you
Uh,
pass on to the generation before? Or
I think that what seems to be a concern for women is finding someone who's gentlemanly
interesting.
and who isn't too forward in presuming that she wants to be a partner of his in any
Mm-hmm.
way. But I
Okay.
think that's not men or women's fault in any way. I just think with the ease of contacting people now, all you have to do is send a message.
Really? Yeah.
It allows people to perhaps behave in ways that they wouldn't choose to behave if they had to have a face-to-face interaction with somebody. So my
Yeah.
main advice to men and women for that matter is
Yeah.
if you were to approach this person in person, how would you approach them?
Mm-hmm.
And you might consider that
Yeah.
before sending a message.
Smart.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of times, even just thinking that a friend, well, more so used to have friends who do that similar thing. I'm like, yo, I'll send this. I'm like, there's no way you would even walk up to her in person, let alone
No,
say that to her.
that's right.
I'm like, you should throw your phone down the toilet, dude. That's not. It's kind of bad. Like, it's really bad. And I've only seen it a few times, so oof.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a frustrating thing. I don't know why there's such a need to do that way or to be that way. I don't know if it's a laziness thing or if it's like you said, like the ease of contacting.
Accessibility. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at
Mm-hmm.
it. What
Yeah,
is
so
some?
I don't know. I'm not an online dating expert because I've never done online dating,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying that to me, that would be, and to a lot of women that I speak to, it's, you're looking for somebody who's appreciating and respecting and, all of those things. So,
Mhm. So, Mandy, do you have any like overall advice from your experiences for the mothers out there that you could say like if one like almost thing to instill or like tip that they could use in their everyday just to make it, I guess, stress free? Because moms always seem to be very stressed out, at least from the few I know.
well, moms are stressed out, right? That's
So,
true.
yeah.
Uh, well, first, I would say it does get easier if you're like a newish mom or you have just small kids. It's all consuming, right? And dads too. But it does
Yeah.
get easier, generally speaking, for me anyway, as my kids
Hmm.
got older, just because, once they're able to self sustain a little bit, the pressure kind of comes off a bit.
Nice.
And, but advice that I would give is
Yeah.
to not forget about yourself. So I think that happens
Interesting.
to especially moms. I'm just going to say it. I think a lot of
Yeah.
times it falls more on moms to feel responsible, and maybe it's just the nature of mothering is that you dedicate and focus all of your attention on your children
Hmm.
and you forget about yourself along the way. And that's where I saw in my experience as a trainer and whatnot,
Hmm.
women gaining a lot of weight. They just, they don't even know what their interests are anymore because they've let it all fall away. They have no friends,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
maintain your life as well. Like, so take care of yourself as well as you take care of your children. Imagine every mom did that. We'd have a lot of happy moms.
Maintain your life. Does that doing that though? Do you find it would? Because from what you've said so far, it seems like that's what you do. Like you haven't forgot yourself. You do your own thing as well, and then come back to it. And like you balance it out well, right? From at least I know from what you've said so far.
I do
Um,
now. I don't
awesome.
think that I always did.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's hard. And I know that it's hard to do that when it's a very stressful time, or can be when you
Yeah.
have kids, and maybe your marriage isn't going so great just because
Mhm.
of the stress, and you have to go to work all day and then you have to come home and you have to do dinner and all those things, so it's very stressful, and
Yeah, it seems
the
rough.
last thing you want to do is go to the gym or whatever, but I think it's
Hmm.
necessary. Yeah.
Interesting. So that's
Yeah,
a
you schedule time for
yeah,
yourself just like you would anything else, and I think that's important, even if it's 20 minutes to do a meditation,
yeah,
anything, right?
somewhere to come like something right to come back to
Mm.
yourself, and then
That's just yours. Yeah.
yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's not something you do. But, it's a
Yeah.
you specific thing to do.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Now, do you have any overall, as we kind of gear towards the end of the show, any like overall perspective or experiences that you think the audience, which would be in like the early 20s to mid 20s, friends around my age, people around my age who have kind of gravitated towards what the show is and what it can be. Um, do you have any advice from your time in that age range that you're like, oh, if I would have known this, I would have gotten my goal sooner, or things would have went smoother? Or do you have any piece of advice or experience that you could share?
I think for me, if I did have to go back to 20 or 25 or whatever, I would be less in a hurry to fit the mold of adulthood. And so I don't know what it's like now. Like that was 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
That I was 26. So, but for me at that time, I felt, I needed to move on to become a professional, to get my job, to get married, to have kids. Those were all of the things that I was in a rush to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I would not do that now.
No.
I would take the pressure off of achieving or accomplishing those things, and maybe take a bit more time to exist as an adult before moving into that stage of life.
Fascinating. What would
Yeah.
you saying that? I'm wondering what would that look like? Like taking more
I don't
time
know.
to be an adult in that realm of things.
I
That's
think maybe
interesting.
take more time to do things that adulthood affords you to do. And I mean that almost literally.
Hmm.
So by the time you get a job and then you start to make some money, um, because not that money means everything, but it does allow you certain
Yeah,
opportunities
it
that
does.
having no money
Oh yeah.
does.
Oh yeah.
So traveling, and I don't mean traveling the world even
Yeah, you
necessarily,
don't
but
take 3 years off to go live in Asia.
no, but travel to go to BC, go
Hmm.
wherever, like experience some traveling, um, experience people, um, experience just, that just life.
Hmm.
To be selfish about it
Yeah,
before
which
you
is
have to
okay
give
to be.
yourself away to other stuff for a large chunk of your life.
Yeah,
And so I feel like that's what I will encourage my kids to do.
nice.
Don't settle down so young,
Huh.
or too young. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel. Would you say settle down is when you? Because I find when people use that term, it's like it almost means don't be in a relationship when you're a young adult unless like you're about to marry them. But I almost wonder if it's like just support each other's goals and go through that, or how that kind
I
of
think
works.
relationships are important, and I think it's important
Hmm.
to have relationships, especially when you're young, because I feel like they're good learning opportunities. I just don't think that deciding to be with one partner too
Mm.
early is a good idea,
Yeah.
especially if you haven't experienced a lot of other kinds of relationships or relationships with other people.
Hmm. Interesting.
Um, just like anything else, like, you don't decide on a car after you see just one car,
Yeah, that's a
you
good
know.
point. Yeah, it's a pretty good
So
example too.
choosing a life partner, I think, should probably take a little bit of time as well.
Hmm.
And figuring out yourself too, right? Like when you're 20, you don't know who you are. When you're
No,
30, you don't know who you are.
no.
And sometimes when you're 40, you don't even know who you are. So take time to figure those things out,
Yeah,
then make more significant decisions.
interesting.
Yeah.
That's a really good piece of advice.
That's some
Wow,
old person advice for you.
that's some old person advice. That's really, really, really long time ago in high school person advice. Oh, that's too funny. That's amazing. I find to that there's a lot of. I almost think that's like there's that same amount of pressure, but I feel people are also rushing into it now more like sooner. It's
Oh yeah.
weird.
Okay.
It feels like from what I've noticed, it's like people should listen to exactly what you said. People like they're like 20. I have a couple friends. They're like in their early 20s. They're younger than me. like an ex-girlfriend who's younger than me has a baby, and I'm like, good for you guys. I'm glad that he's healthy and everything. It's just like it all seems a little soon, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I mean, lots of good things come of those sorts of decisions as well.
Mm-hmm.
But in my experience, if I were to do it over, and the advice that I give, like I said, that I give my children,
Yep.
is to be selfish. You do you first.
You do you first before you go.
Yeah.
Ah, interesting. I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Mandy,
Mm-hmm.
this has been fun.
I'm glad. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
I wasn't nervous at all.
No,
Just
I
kidding.
was yeah. I always find I get nervous a bit. And I'll probably cut this part out anyway. Maybe we'll see. I always find I get nervous doing shows, especially when, like, at first it just looked awkward, and then now it's like I'm talking to people who I admire, who I look up to, who have accomplished more, and it's a lot of things that I'm like, all right, you got to prepare, you got to plan, you got to prepare, you got to like be attentive, like have a process that works. And then it's cool though, right? Because it's, you go from it's not being too comfortable to going to, well, instead of it looking really painful to watch and listen to, now it's really good, but now it puts more on the host. So I'm like, I'm not nervous to go have a conversation with my friend when I record it. The first time I did it, I was like, it was just like, well, what's your favorite color? And it's like, nobody cares. But now it's like, oh, what's the advice you have for men in there? It's like, there's a lot more to unpack as as shows go forward. And I think what you're doing in your show and the people you've had on so far, and then the message and your audience, I think is phenomenal. I'm a fan. Oh, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Like, it's really good. And I think it's cool as well for me as a listener, knowing the guests you have on prior to you having them on. I could listen to Cliff talk all day, and stuff like that. So hearing the conversations you have and the way you go about talking to them is, it's super cool. And I'm a fan, and I appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you very much. And I appreciate you asking me to be a guest. And that is great feedback, because I'm still learning too. So I'm still, trying to refine my own interviewing techniques, which, under construction. So, but anyways, thank you for the feedback. Thank you for the opportunity. It was fun.